for the simple fact that he's fugazi. I mean, you know, all the fake tough guy role. I mean, I hate it. You know, I just think he's fugazi all around.
It is Game 1, the Meadowlands, April 17th, 2004. The New York Knicks are getting embarrassed. Down 20 in the fourth quarter of a playoff game that was supposed to be competitive. Nobody's watching the Knicks at this point. The real fans are already mentally out the door. And then it happens. Knicks forward Tim Thomas rises for a dunk. Meaningless. Inconsequential. A consolation prize dunk in a game already decided. And Nets center Jason Collins meets him in the air. Not at the ball, at the body. Collins' arm comes across Thomas' chest. His shoulder, his face. Thomas can't protect himself. He lands on his tailbone, and he doesn't get up. They wheel Tim Thomas out of the building on a gurney. He spends the night in a hospital, back spasms, bruised ankle, concussions deep in his lower back. He is done for the series. Here's the thing. What happened next had nothing to do with basketball. It had everything to do with identity. Let me tell you about Tim Thomas. In 1997, the New Jersey Nets selected Tim Thomas with the 7th overall pick in the NBA draft. 7 out of the entire country, out of every player who had ever put on a pair of basketball shoes. And if you watched Tim Thomas move, you understood why. 6'10", handles like a guard, could shoot threes, run the pick and roll, guard 1 through 5. The guy was essentially the prototype of the modern NBA wing, built in a lab 15 years before the rest of the league caught up to the concept. Every scout who saw him said the same word, potential. The Bucks paid for that potential. George Karl, one of the best coaches of his generation, persuaded owner Herb Kohl to give Tim Thomas a 6-year, $67 million contract in 2000. $67 million. That is the number you write on a cornerstone player, the kind of number that comes with real expectations. So how many games did Tim Thomas start in the season after signing that contract? 16 out of 76. And here's the part that stings. It wasn't injuries, it wasn't bad luck. George Karl himself explained it to reporters that October. When asked about his $10 million per year players' minutes, the head coach essentially said it wasn't his problem. Read that again. The head coach of the team, asked about his $10 million player, said getting him more minutes wasn't his priority. His own coach. Thomas kept insisting he was fine with the situation. My thing is winning, he told reporters. I am not a selfish player, and maybe he meant it. But there's a version of Tim Thomas that looks at the situation and fights for more, demands the court, makes himself impossible to bench. Tim Thomas was not that version of Tim Thomas. And then came 2003. The Bucks made the playoffs that year, first round, against the New Jersey Nets, the same team we were going to keep talking about, and in the middle of the playoff push, with everything on the line, Tim Thomas refused to re-enter a game in Denver, March 26th, just refused, wouldn't go back in. The Bucks fined him, benched him, replaced him in the starting lineup with a rookie, Marcus Haislip. Translation: I don't want to talk about this right now, but I promise it was not my fault. He got his starting spot back only because he went off for 21 points against Orlando in the last week of the season. Karl still refused to publicly confirm he'd earn it back. And on the other side of the court, watching all of this play out, was Kenyon Martin. He saw the headlines, he knew the story, he knew exactly who Tim Thomas was. That offseason, Tim Thomas was dealt to the New York Knicks for Keith Van Horn. New chapter, new city, new start, but the record followed them. Now let me tell you about Kenyon Martin. In the year 2000, Rod Thorne, the Nets president and chief of basketball operations, selected Kenyon Martin with the first overall pick in the NBA draft, the very top, number 1 in the entire country. And unlike the most number 1 picks, where organizations are projecting a ceiling, this selection was about building a very specific kind of team. Here's the context you need. Rod Thorne had spent years as the NBA's vice president of the basketball operations, essentially the league's chief enforcer. the man who handed out flagrant foul suspensions to the Rick Mahorns and Bill Lambiers of the world. He had watched more game tape on hard fouls than any human being alive. He knew exactly what a menacing frontcourt presence was worth on a playoff team, and he deliberately drafted one. By the 2001-2002 season, Kenyon Martin had the most flagrant fouls in the entire NBA, 5 flagrants, including 2 flagrant 2s, the kind that get you ejected on contact. He had pounded Karl Malone to the floor, clobbered Tracy McGrady with a forearm, sent Jerome Williams sprawling. His team's coach described him off the court as almost unrecognizable from the player you saw during games. Here's the thing about Kenyon Martin that his critics always missed. The toughness wasn't a performance, it wasn't a character he created for the cameras. Rod Thorne literally built a franchise around it. Lawrence Frank, who became the Nets head coach, told reporters Martin was the best defensive player in the league because he could guard positions 1 through 5. His own coaching staff lobbied coaches around the league to vote him all-defensive team. This was not a man playing tough guy. This was the actual tough guy. And while Tim Thomas was starting 16 games and refusing to re-enter games in Denver, Kenyon Martin was taking the New Jersey Nets to the back-to-back NBA Finals. Just let that sit for a second. April 17, 2004, first round of the Eastern Conference Playoffs, Nets vs. Knicks. The Nets are heavily favored. They have Jason Kidd, Richie Jefferson, Kenyon Martin in his prime. The Knicks are patchwork roster still being assembled under Isaiah Thomas. Nobody expects this to be close. Through 3 quarters, it isn't. The Knicks are down 20 in the fourth when Tim Thomas catches the ball on the wing and decides, you know what, I'm going to dunk this. Which honestly, respect the mentality. You're down 20, the game is over, you dunk it. Jason Collins is the lone defender. His right arm comes across Thomas' chest, then his shoulder, then his face. Thomas is already airborne. He can't brace for impact. He lands directly on his tailbone. The arena goes quiet. They wheel Tim Thomas out on a gurney. He spends the night in a hospital. Back spasms, bruised ankle, concussions, done for the series. Down 0-2 against the defending Eastern Conference champions. Allen Houston can't play, Tim Thomas can't play, Stephon Marbury is fighting Jason Kidd alone. It is objectively not going well. And Tim Thomas, watching from home in the street clothes with a bad back and a bruised ankle and a burning grievance, cannot take it anymore. 2 days before Game 3, Tim Thomas made himself available to reporters at the Knicks practice facility in Greenberg. First public statement since the foul. He came out in street clothes and he came to burn everything down. First, he went after Jason Collins. He said Collins never attempted to go for the ball, that he went directly for his body, that it was deliberate. Then he went after his own teammates, the ones who watched him get carried out and did nothing. And then, the moment everything changed, he went after Kenyon Martin. Martin had apparently dismissed the injury with something along the lines of nobody got shot, and when Thomas heard that from his hospital bed through his bad back and bruised ankle, he reached back to his Paterson, New Jersey roots and produced one of the most memorable lines of the entire NBA era, Fugazi. For anyone unfamiliar, it is a word out of Donnie Brasco, Italian slang that entered hip-hop lexicon. It means fake, phony, counterfeit, not the actual thing. He also said for the record, somebody called Don King and hook it up for us. So let's take stock of what Tim Thomas had just done. In one press conference, from the injured list, in street clothes, he accused a respected player of deliberately injuring him. He publicly shamed his own teammates on record. He called the Eastern Conference's most feared enforcer a fake, and he called in a boxing promoter. Sean Powell of Newsday wrote a column the next morning that cut directly to the center of it. Thomas, Powell wrote, has spunk, he just hasn't shown it yet, in a uniform. The next morning before Game 3 at the Madison Square Garden, Kenyon Martin walked out to the Nets shoot-around, and he was wearing a newspaper headline, Whiny Tim, taped to the front of his practice jersey. He didn't come out swinging wildly. He came out with a file, a documented, organized case against Tim Thomas. The kind of persecution that doesn't need a lawyer. He started with accountability. Translation: if you want to say something to me, say it to my face. You didn't. You called a press conference. Then he produced the receipts. He wasn't speculated about Milwaukee. He was on the opposing bench during the 2003 first-round series when Tim Thomas-Karl relationship was already publicly fractured. He watched Thomas get benched for refusing to re-enter a game. He knew, he kept going. That is a philosopher's read on an opponent. Pandora's box. Unpredictability as a character flaw. And then just when you think he's finished, Martin dropped the celebrity game detail, unprompted. Thomas had called Martin's agent during the season to invite him to his celebrity game, then called him Fugazi 6 months later. He also said, without being asked, that he didn't think the Knicks acquiring Thomas for Keith Van Horn was a good trade. This was notable. Martin had criticized Keith Van Horn's heart after 2002 finals. Now he was implying Van Horn was the better deal. They booed Thomas when he first got to New York, Martin noted, so maybe he should worry about his own fans before worrying about Kenyon Martin. Lawrence Frank, the Nets coach, not a man given to dramatics, was asked if he had problem with Martin's response. That was all he needed to say. That night, Game 3, Madison Square Garden, the crowd showed up ready for a fight. Signs aimed at Martin, fan chants, one sign read, Kmart, you and me in a room. The Garden wanted blood. Kenyon Martin gave them something better. 19 points, 15 rebounds, and 2 plays that ended whatever remaining hope the Knicks had. With 1:05 remaining and the Knicks threatening a comeback, Martin stripped Penny Hardaway in the front court, clean, ruthless. Then with the 26 seconds left, he converted a 3-point play, layup and the foul to push the lead to 80-76. Third consecutive double-double of the series. Nets won 81-78, up 3-0. The sweep was coming. And after the game, here's what separates man from performance. Kenyon Martin said almost nothing. No, take that. No victory lap. No Fugazi enough for you. He had 19 points and 15 rebounds and a 3-point play with 26 seconds left, and his entire post-game acknowledgement of the entire situation was: the Nets swept the Knicks. Martin was traded to the Denver Nuggets that summer. Different conference, different city, fresh start. Most beefs end here. Both guys move on. The story becomes a footnote. Tim Thomas did not move on. At Knicks Media Day in October 2004, 6 months after the series ended, Thomas renewed the beef unprompted. He'd run into Martin in Dallas 3 days in a row at a charity event over the summer, said nothing happened, said Martin wouldn't engage directly, said Martin's codes word for the papers. And then to the media, the exact same third party that Martin had criticized him for using, Thomas doubled down on the boxing challenge. He trained as a boxer that offseason. Lou Dua, International Boxing Hall of Fame trainer from Thomas' hometown of Patterson, offered to prepare him. His son-in-law Tommy Brooks, who had trained Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson and Pernell Whitaker, was on board. And Don King, responded publicly from his headquarters in Deerfield Beach, Florida, said his phone was always open if the two wanted to settle it in the ring. Don King was involved. Think about what's happening here. The man who called someone else Fugazi fake has spent his entire offseason training for a boxing match that will never happen, calling out a player who already moved to another city through the media, the exact channel he criticized Kenyon Martin for using 6 months earlier. December 12, 2004, the Knicks travel to Denver. Tim Thomas and Kenyon Martin are in the same building for the first time since the 2004 playoffs. Reporters circle both men. They want escalation, they want the confrontation, they want their headline. Kenyon Martin gave them 8 words, and the beef was over. Not with a fight, not with a fight, not with a dramatic moment. It didn't die in a blaze, it ran out of air. Because only one man was still breathing into it. Thomas, finally reading the room, said, "I don't expect anything, I just expect a good competitive basketball game." 6 months of boxing challenges, Don King involvement, media day declarations, off-season training, a Hall of Fame trainer in his corner, all of it reduced to I just want a good game. This has been Oldskoolbball. If you made it this far, you already know Old School NBA had a different kind of accountability. You couldn't hide behind analytics, you couldn't hide behind a brand, you couldn't hide behind a press conference. The court told the truth, and sometimes so did a newspaper headline taped to a practice jersey. Subscribe if you haven't, ring the bell, and I'll see you on the next one.